The dust cloud trailing behind the stagecoach dissipated into the scorching New Mexico air as it rumbled to a halt outside the makeshift trading post of Redemption Springs in the summer of 1876. Nobody paid much attention to the battered leather trunk that tumbled from the roof, nor to the slender figure that was roughly pushed out after it, collapsing into the dirt without so much as a whimper. Nathan Harding pulled the brim of his hat lower against the harsh afternoon sun, observing the scene from his position on the porch of the general store. His weathered hand instinctively moved to the revolver at his hip when he saw the woman crumple to the ground, her once fine dress now torn and soiled. The stagecoach driver merely tossed her small carpetbag after her, climbed back onto his seat, and with a crack of his whip, continued on toward Santa Fe. "Damn it all," Nathan muttered, striding across the dusty street. As he approached, he could see the woman attempting to rise, her arms trembling violently with the effort. Purple bruises marked her exposed wrists and a deep cut marred her lower lip. Her attempts to stand failed and she collapsed once more into the dirt. Nathan knelt beside her, his shadow offering momentary relief from the blistering sun. "Madam," he said gently. She flinched away, her eyes wide with fear as she tried to shield her face with shaking hands. "I ain't gonna hurt you," he said, his voice softening. Without waiting for a response, he carefully slid one arm beneath her knees and the other around her shoulders, lifting her as if she weighed nothing at all. She was light, too light, and the way she tensed at his touch told him more than words could about what she'd endured. Her breath caught as he cradled her against his chest, and Nathan looked down into eyes the color of a stormy sky. "No one will hurt you again," he promised, his voice low and certain as he carried her toward Doc Sullivan's office at the end of the street. Rebecca Porter had never felt more alone than she did in that moment, carried in the arms of a stranger across a town whose name she'd only learned from the stagecoach manifest. Her ribs ached with each breath, and the sunlight pierced her head like needles. The cowboy's face was partially shadowed by his hat, but she could see the firm set of his jaw, the concern in his eyes. "I can walk," she whispered, though they both knew it was a lie. "Sure you can," Nathan replied, not breaking his stride, "but humor me anyway." Rebecca had left Philadelphia with dreams of teaching at the new schoolhouse in Santa Fe. Her fiancé, Charles, had insisted on accompanying her west, promising adventure and protection. 2 days into their journey, she discovered the true nature of the man she'd agreed to marry. His charm had dissolved into drunken rage when she'd questioned his gambling away their travel funds. The beating that followed had been the first of many. "Almost there," Nathan said, nodding toward a small building with a hand-painted sign reading J. Sullivan, M.D. He shouldered open the door without putting her down. "Good Lord, Nate," came a gruff voice from within. "What have you brought me now?" Found her outside the trading post. Stagecoach just dumped her there. Rebecca felt herself being lowered onto a clean but worn examination table. The room smelled of carbolic acid and whiskey. The doctor was an older man with kind eyes and steady hands that belied his apparent fondness for the bottle. "I'm fine," Rebecca protested weakly. "I just need to rest." "She needs looking after, Doc," Nathan said, stepping back but not leaving. "I'll cover whatever it costs." "I can pay my own way," Rebecca insisted, though her reticule contained barely enough for a night's lodging. Charles had taken everything else before abandoning her to the stagecoach driver with instructions to drop the troublesome baggage wherever convenient. The doctor's examination was thorough but gentle. 3 broken ribs, extensive bruising, mild concussion, and dehydration, he concluded. "Who did this to you, miss?" Rebecca looked away. It doesn't matter now. It matters to me, Nathan said, his voice quiet but hard as steel. Rebecca studied him properly for the first time. Tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-darkened skin and eyes the rich brown of coffee. His clothes were worn but clean, and he carried himself with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to hard work and harder decisions. "My former fiancé," she admitted finally. "He's long gone now, headed to California with what was left of my money." Nathan's expression darkened. "Got a name, Nathan," the doctor warned. "Let the law handle it." "What law?" Nathan scoffed. "Marshall hasn't been through in 2 months." "Please," Rebecca said. "I just want to forget him." The doctor finished binding her ribs and mixing a powder for pain. "She needs rest. Can't stay here, though. My wife's sister is arriving tomorrow, taking my spare room." "The boarding house is full with those railroad surveyors," Nathan said thoughtfully. "She can stay at my place. I've got a spare room." Rebecca stiffened. "That's very kind, but I'll be in the bunkhouse with my ranch hands," Nathan added quickly. "House will be all yours until you're back on your feet." "I couldn't impose. You could try the saloon," the doctor suggested dryly. "I'm sure those rooms are available by the hour." Nathan shot him a withering look. "Not helping, Doc." Rebecca closed her eyes, exhaustion overwhelming her pride. She had nowhere to go, no one to turn to. "Thank you," she whispered, "just until I can find work." "Nathan owns the largest cattle spread this side of the territory," the doctor said. "Half the town works for him already." "Sullivan," Nathan warned. The doctor smiled. "Just providing context for the lady." An hour later, Rebecca found herself in Nathan's wagon, propped carefully on pillows the doctor's wife had insisted on sending along. Her trunk and carpetbag were secured in the back. The pain powder had dulled the worst of her discomfort, but each jolt of the wagon sent fresh waves of agony through her body. Nathan kept the horses at a gentle walk. "Not much further," he assured her, noticing her pallor. "Double H Ranch is just beyond that ridge." As they crested the hill, Rebecca gasped. Sprawled before them was a vista that took her breath away. A large, well-built ranch house stood proudly amid several outbuildings, corrals, and a bunkhouse. In the distance, cattle grazed on green pastures fed by a winding stream. Mountains rose majestically in the background, still capped with snow despite the summer heat. "It's beautiful," she said. Nathan's expression softened with pride. "Built most of it myself. Started with nothing but a claim and 20 head of cattle 8 years ago." "You've accomplished a great deal," Rebecca said sincerely. "Had my share of setbacks," he replied, guiding the wagon toward the main house. "Range war nearly wiped me out in 72, drought almost finished what the rustlers started in 74. Yet you persevered." Nathan glanced at her, a hint of a smile touching his lips. "Ain't much choice out here but to keep going." The house was larger than it had appeared from a distance, with a wide veranda wrapping around 3 sides. Inside, Rebecca was surprised by the comfortable furnishings and touches that spoke of care curtains at the windows, books on shelves, a piano in one corner of the main room. "My mother's," Nathan explained, following her gaze to the instrument. "Never could bring myself to part with it after she passed." "Do you play?" Rebecca asked. "About as well as a bear with mittens," he admitted with a self-deprecating chuckle. I taught music in Philadelphia before deciding to come west." Nathan led her to a bedroom at the back of the house. The space was simply furnished but clean, with a bed, dresser, washstand, and a small desk beneath a window that overlooked a kitchen garden. "It's not fancy," he said, suddenly appearing uncomfortable, "but it's quiet." "It's perfect," Rebecca assured him. "I don't know how to thank you." "No need for thanks. Rest up." My housekeeper, Mrs. Fenton, comes by 3 times a week. She'll be here tomorrow to help with whatever you need." That night, lying in the unfamiliar bed, Rebecca listened to the sounds of the ranch settling for the night. She could hear distant laughter from the bunkhouse, the occasional lowing of cattle, the whisper of wind through the cottonwoods outside her window. For the first time in weeks, she felt safe. The next morning brought Mrs. Fenton, a no-nonsense widow in her 50s who arrived with fresh bread and a determination to fatten Rebecca up. "Too thin by half," she declared, setting a tray of food beside Rebecca's bed. "Mr. Harding said you're to eat everything I bring you." "Mr. Harding seems to have strong opinions about my welfare," Rebecca observed. Mrs. Fenton's expression softened. "He's a good man. Lost his wife and baby to childbed fever 5 years back. Threw himself into building this ranch afterward." Rebecca felt a pang of sympathy. "I had no idea." "He doesn't talk about it," Mrs. Fenton said, "but it changed him, made him more mindful of those who need help." Over the next week, Rebecca's strength began to return. She ventured from her room to the veranda, where she spent hours watching the activity of the ranch. Nathan would tip his hat to her each morning as he rode out, and again each evening upon his return. Their conversations were brief, but increasingly comfortable. On the 8th day, Rebecca made her way carefully to the piano. Her ribs still ached, but the desire to feel music beneath her fingers again was overwhelming. She began with simple scales, then progressed to a chop-in nocturne that had always soothed her. She was so absorbed in the music that she didn't notice Nathan standing in the doorway, hat in hand, listening with an expression of wonder. "That's the most beautiful thing I've heard since coming west," he said when she finished. Rebecca startled, then smiled. "Music was my refuge growing up. My father was strict. The piano was the one place I could express myself." Nathan moved into the room, setting his hat on a side table. "My mother used to play hymns on Sundays. House hasn't heard music since she died. Would you like me to play something else?" Rebecca offered. "I'd like that very much," he said, settling into a chair. Rebecca played for nearly an hour, moving from classical pieces to folk songs to hymns. When she finally stopped, her fingers tired but her spirit lighter than it had been in months, she found Nathan watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You should be the school teacher here," he said abruptly. "What? Redemption Springs needs a teacher. Town's growing. Families settling, railroads coming, children need schooling." "I came west to teach in Santa Fe," Rebecca said, confused by the sudden suggestion. "Santa Fe's got plenty of teachers. We've got none." Nathan leaned forward. "Town council's been looking to hire someone for months. Schoolhouse is built, sitting empty." Rebecca considered the idea. "I'd need somewhere to live." "Town has a small house for the teacher, nothing fancy, but it's yours with the position." Nathan hesitated. "Or you could stay here." "It's a bit of a ride to town, but that wouldn't be proper," Rebecca interrupted, feeling heat rise to her cheeks. Nathan looked away. "No, I suppose not." The next day, Nathan drove Rebecca into town to meet with the council members. The schoolhouse was indeed built and waiting, a simple one-room structure with rows of desks, a teacher's desk at the front, and a small bell tower. The teacherage next door was snug but tidy, with a bedroom, kitchen, and small sitting room. The council, consisting of the general store owner, the saloon proprietor, and surprisingly, Doc Sullivan, hired her on the spot. School would begin in 3 weeks, giving her time to prepare and fully recover. "I'll have your things brought from the ranch tomorrow," Nathan said as they left the meeting. Rebecca felt an unexpected pang at the thought of leaving the Double H. "Thank you for everything you've done." Nathan merely nodded, his expression unreadable. The following days were a flurry of activity as Rebecca settled into her new home and prepared for the school term. Children appeared at her door bearing gifts: fresh eggs, a jar of honey, a handmade quilt sent by parents eager to make a good impression on the new teacher. Nathan came by only once to deliver her trunk and carpet bag as promised. He declined her invitation to stay for tea, citing work at the ranch. The brief encounter left Rebecca feeling strangely bereft. 2 days before school was to begin, Rebecca was arranging books on the shelves when the door burst open. A man stumbled in, unshaven and reeking of whiskey. It took her a moment to recognize Charles, his once handsome face now bloated from drink. "There you are," he slurred, advancing on her. "Thought you could hide from me." Rebecca backed away, her heart pounding. "How did you find me?" Stagecoach driver remembered dropping a pretty lady in this miserable excuse for a town. Charles grabbed her arm, twisting it painfully. "You're coming with me." "Still need a respectable wife for my business ventures." "Let go of me," Rebecca demanded, struggling against his grip. Charles backhanded her across the face, sending her sprawling against the desks. "Still haven't learned your place, I see." Rebecca tasted blood as she tried to crawl away. Charles caught her ankle, dragging her back. "No one refuses Charles Winters, especially not a penniless orphan I rescued from spinsterhood." The schoolhouse door crashed open again, and Charles was suddenly lifted bodily away from her. Rebecca looked up to see Nathan holding her attacker by the throat, his face a mask of cold fury. "You touch her again, you're a dead man," Nathan said, his voice terrifyingly calm. Charles struggled in his grip. "This is none of your concern, she's my fiancée." "Former fiancé," Rebecca corrected, rising shakily to her feet. "And the man who beat me half to death before robbing me and abandoning me." Nathan's grip tightened. "That true?" Charles clawed at Nathan's hands. "She's lying, hysterical woman, always making up stories." Nathan looked to Rebecca, who pushed up her sleeve to reveal the fading bruises that still circled her wrists. "He did this," she said quietly, "and worse." Without another word, Nathan dragged Charles outside and threw him into the street. "You've got 1 hour to be gone from this town," he said. "If I see you again, I won't be so generous." Charles scrambled to his feet, his face ugly with rage. "You'll regret this, both of you." He reached for the gun at his hip. The shot rang out before Charles could clear leather. Nathan's draw had been too fast to follow, but the smoking gun in his hand told the story. Charles crumpled, clutching his shoulder where the bullet had struck. Doc Sullivan, who had heard the commotion from his office across the street, hurried over. "What happened?" "Man drew on me," Nathan said simply. "I suggest you patch him up and put him on the next stage out of here." The doctor nodded, summoning help to carry the moaning Charles to his office. Nathan turned to Rebecca, holstering his weapon. "Are you hurt?" "Just shaken," she said, though her cheek throbbed where Charles had struck her. Nathan gently tilted her face to examine the reddening mark. His touch was careful, his eyes troubled. "I should have killed him." "No," Rebecca said firmly. "You're not a killer." "I've killed before," Nathan admitted. "During the war, afterward protecting what's mine. This is different." "Is it?" Nathan asked softly. "Because the thought of him hurting you makes me want to drag him back and finish the job." Rebecca placed her hand over his. "Thank you for stopping him." "For keeping your promise." Nathan looked confused. "What promise?" "The day we met. You said no one would hurt me again." Something shifted in Nathan's expression, a vulnerability behind the strength. "I meant it, still do." That evening, Rebecca sat on the small porch of her teacherage, watching the sunset paint the western sky in brilliant oranges and purples. The day's events had left her drained but oddly clear-headed. Charles would be gone by morning, sent away on the eastbound stage with a bandaged shoulder and strict warnings never to return. She heard the approaching hoofbeats before she saw the rider. Nathan dismounted in front of her house, tying his horse to the hitching post before approaching the porch. "Came to check on you," he said, removing his hat. "Doc said Charles left on the afternoon stage, won't be bothering you again. Thank you." Rebecca gestured to the empty chair beside her. "Would you like to sit?" Nathan hesitated, then took the offered seat. They sat in companionable silence for several minutes, watching the last light fade from the sky. "I've been thinking," Nathan said finally, "about what you said about propriety." Rebecca turned to look at him. "Oh, I'm not a man who speaks flowery words," he continued, staring straight ahead. "But I haven't been able to get you out of my mind since the day I found you. The way you play that piano, the way you face each day with courage despite what was done to you." He paused. "I know it's too soon. You've been through hell, but I'd like permission to call on you properly." "Court you if you're willing." Rebecca's heart hammered in her chest. "Nathan, you don't have to answer now," he said quickly. "Just think about it. I'm a patient man." Rebecca reached out, touching his hand lightly. "Ask me again in a month after I've had time to stand on my own 2 feet." Nathan nodded, understanding in his eyes. A month it is. The school term began with 15 eager students ranging from 6 to 16 years of age. Rebecca threw herself into teaching, finding joy in the bright faces that greeted her each morning. The work was exhausting but fulfilling in a way her Philadelphia position had never been. True to his word, Nathan kept his distance for exactly 1 month. He appeared at her door on a Sunday afternoon, freshly shaved and wearing a clean shirt with his best vest. In his hand was a small bouquet of wildflowers. "It's been a month," he said simply. Rebecca smiled, inviting him in for tea. They talked for hours about his ranch, her students, books they'd read, dreams they'd harbored. When it was time for him to leave, he stood at the door, hat in hand. "May I call on you again?" he asked. "I'd be disappointed if you didn't," Rebecca replied. Over the following weeks, their courtship progressed with a sweetness that healed old wounds. Nathan taught Rebecca to ride, laughing with delight at her initial trepidation and subsequent enthusiasm. She introduced him to Shakespeare, reading aloud by lamplight on her porch as the autumn evenings grew cooler. The townsfolk watched their romance with approval. Mrs. Fenton declared them perfectly suited, while Doc Sullivan took credit for bringing them together in the first place. As winter approached, bringing the first dusting of snow to the mountains, Nathan invited Rebecca to Sunday dinner at the ranch. The house had changed since she'd left. Curtains had been washed, furniture polished, and a new rug brightened the main room. "Mrs. Fenton's been busy," Rebecca observed. "She has opinions about bachelor living," Nathan admitted. "Stronger ones since I mentioned I might not be a bachelor much longer." Rebecca's heart skipped. "Is that so?" After dinner, Nathan led her to the piano. "Would you play something?" "The house has missed your music." Rebecca sat at the instrument, her fingers finding the keys. She played a gentle melody, one she'd composed herself over the past weeks. When she finished, she turned to find Nathan kneeling beside the piano bench. "I've rehearsed a dozen speeches," he said, "and forgotten every one. All I know is that I love you, Rebecca Porter. My life was empty before you came into it, and I don't want to live another day without you. Will you marry me?" Tears filled Rebecca's eyes. "Yes," she whispered. "With all my heart, yes." They were married on Christmas Eve in the town's small church, decorated with pine boughs and candles for the holiday. Rebecca wore a gown of deep blue velvet that Nathan had ordered from Denver. Her students sang carols as she walked down the aisle. After the ceremony, they returned to the Double H, now their home together. Snow had begun to fall, transforming the landscape into a glistening wonderland beneath the moonlight. Nathan carried her across the threshold, recalling that first day when he'd carried her broken and afraid to the doctor's office. "No one will hurt you again," he repeated his promise, setting her gently on her feet. "Not while I draw breath." Rebecca reached up to touch his face. "I know. And you should know that your heart is safe with me as well." Spring brought new life to the ranch, calves in the pastures, wildflowers on the hillsides, and the news that Rebecca was expecting their first child. Nathan's joy was tempered with fear, remembering his first wife's fate, but Rebecca's quiet confidence gradually eased his worries. She continued teaching until the end of the school term, then focused on preparing for the baby's arrival. Nathan built a cradle from pine, polishing it until it gleamed. Rebecca sewed tiny garments in the evenings as they sat together by the fire. On a warm September night, as a harvest moon hung full and golden over the ranch, their daughter was born after a mercifully easy labor. They named her Emma after Nathan's mother. As he held his daughter for the first time, Nathan's eyes met Rebecca's over the tiny bundle. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "For what?" Rebecca asked, exhausted but radiant. "For surviving. For being strong enough to trust again. For giving me a second chance at happiness." Rebecca smiled, remembering how far they'd come from that dusty day outside the trading post. "We gave each other that chance." 5 years passed in a blur of everyday joys and challenges. The ranch prospered, the town grew with the arrival of the railroad, and Emma was joined by a brother, James. Rebecca continued to teach, having persuaded the town council to build a larger school to accommodate the influx of new families. On the anniversary of their first meeting, Nathan surprised Rebecca with a piano recital by their daughter, who had inherited her mother's musical talent. As Emma played a simple tune, her small fingers careful on the keys, Nathan slipped his arm around his wife's waist. "Do you ever think about how different our lives might have been if that stagecoach had kept going?" he asked quietly. Rebecca leaned into his embrace. "I try not to dwell on what might have been, but I thank God every day for sending me to Redemption Springs. And I thank him for giving me the courage to lift you up that day," Nathan replied, pressing a kiss to her temple. Later that night, with their children asleep and the ranch quiet under a canopy of stars, Rebecca stood on the veranda, breathing in the scent of sage and pine. Nathan joined her, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders against the evening chill. "I have something for you," he said, placing a small leather-bound book in her hands. Rebecca opened it to find sheet music compositions she'd written over the years, now professionally printed and bound. "How did you do this?" she asked, astonished. "Sent them to a publisher in San Francisco," Nathan explained. "They want more, said you have a unique voice." Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. "You've always believed in me, even when I couldn't believe in myself." "That goes both ways," Nathan said, drawing her into his arms. "You saw a future for us when all I could see was the past." They stood together in the moonlight, the ranch spread before them, a testament to perseverance, courage, and the healing power of love. From the brutal beginning of their story had blossomed something beautiful and enduring, as vast and promising as the western sky above them. "No one will hurt you again," Nathan had promised on that first day, and he had kept his word. But more than protection, he had given Rebecca a home, a family, and a love that had transformed both their lives. And in the end, that was the greatest gift of all.